I am Arthur Ballard, and when I proposed to my future wife, I hoped for a calm, caring, and loving marriage. But the way it eventually collapsed still gives me goosebumps on my body. It all started one ordinary day, and at some point went too far. I thought I had everything under control, although in fact I had lost it a long time ago.
My day started like any other, with the sun shining through the partially lowered blinds of my office, casting long lines of shadows on the floor. It was an ordinary day filled with mundane paperwork, the usual routine of my workdays from 9 in the morning until 5 in the evening. The familiar chime of a new email notification interrupted my thoughts. I glanced at the sender, Jessica. I didn't recognize the name, but the subject of the email caught my attention. You need to know the truth. Curiously, I opened it, expecting perhaps a commercial offer or spam. Instead, I was greeted by an opening line that felt like a punch to the gut. I think your wife is having an affair with one of the pharmaceutical representatives of our company. My heart started pounding, my mind trying to dismiss it. It was probably a joke or a case of mistaken identity, but deep down, a cold, nauseating fear began to spread in the pit of my stomach. The email continued with detailed descriptions of how the sender, Jessica, noticed frequent and intimate interactions between my wife and one particular representative. Hesitantly, I replied, I appreciate your concern, but I'm sure you are mistaken. Can you provide any evidence? I asked, half hoping she couldn't. I tried to push the email to the furthest corner of my mind, convincing myself it was just a mistaken attempt by someone to bring drama into my measured life. But as I tried to convince myself of this, another notification sounded from my computer. Jessica's name popped up on the screen again, this time accompanied by an attachment. With a pounding heart, I opened it, unable to imagine what I would see next. Before me were explicit photos of my wife, Laura, with some man in an office, followed by photos of my wife sitting at a table in a restaurant, laughing with the man. The photo conveyed their closeness so vividly, it seemed as though they were joined in a single burst of joy. Their hands were almost touching each other on the table. At that moment, I felt as if the world was spinning around me, and I was sinking into a sea of doubts and betrayal. Jessica's accompanying message was brief. I took all these photos today. We can meet for lunch if you need confirmation. I chose to ignore the messages, but decided to save all the photos just in case, to verify their authenticity, in case someone wanted to harm us. I spent the rest of the workday trying to stay calm, but still felt uneasy. When evening came, Laura entered the house with the same carefree smile that always charmed me, and her infectious laugh that I remembered from the day we first met. But when she approached me, she immediately noticed that I was acting strange and agitated. "What's wrong?" she asked with a concerned look. I mumbled, trying to sound as casual as possible. "I guess I ate something wrong for lunch and my stomach has been hurting all day." Then I took a risk. "How was your lunch today?" I asked, trying to hide the anxiety in my voice, though it was an impulsive question I had never asked her before. She seemed puzzled by the question for a moment, but quickly replied, "Oh, the girls and I went to the cafe across the street. I had soup and salad. I'm feeling pretty good. But you clearly don't look well. Have you taken any medicina?" Her gaze was steady, her voice didn't waver, and in that moment, I realized something was truly wrong, and she might be cheating on me. The evening passed in a tense atmosphere. Laura gave me medicine and started talking about her work days, joking and trying to cheer me up. But I wasn't in the mood. Only when she fell into a deep sleep did I take the most decisive and, perhaps, most desperate step in our life together. Slipping out of bed on cautious feet, like a thief in the night, I quietly took her phone. At that moment, my fingers seemed to have a will of their own, flying over the screen in search of evidence that could dispel my doubts or, conversely, confirm my worst fears. Sorting through messages, pictures, anything that could give me answers, I discovered a deleted message thread. My heart tightened in anticipation, and when I opened the messages with this, Jonathan, everything became clear. Explicit words, leaving no room for ambiguity, painted a picture that made my vision darken. Wanting to know more, I restored 70% of their conversation, and aside from the explicit messages, I also found dozens of photos and videos of an intimate nature. The realization that my wife had been leading a double life for several months hit me with unexpected force. Rage, such rage that I had never felt before, consumed me entirely. Unable to contain the emotional explosion, I stormed back into our bedroom. I began to scream and couldn't stop, despite the weight of the betrayal that seemed to physically propel me forward. The quiet hum of the fan and the chirping of crickets outside the window suddenly disappeared into nothingness as my emotions spiraled tighter and tighter. The only thing before my eyes was the betrayal I so desperately did not want to acknowledge. "Do you think I'm a fool? Thought I wouldn't find out?" I yelled various phrases, trying to hurt her. Then I grabbed a glass of cold water, and as Laura lay awake, trying to comprehend what was happening, I poured the water on her and continued to call her offensive names. I will never forget the expression on her face when she woke up from my sudden return. First shock, then fear, and after, the realization of what had happened. The dim light of the room illuminated Laura's tear-stained face, adding a particular dramatic effect to the scene. She looked at me, her blue eyes wide open and filled with a mix of confusion and terror, as if she couldn't believe the reality of what was happening. I opened on my phone her today's photos from the cafe, where she was sitting with a man. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling with shock and fear, as if she sensed the approaching storm. In response to her question, I threw my phone on the bed. Anger boiled inside me like a volcano before an eruption. "You tell me," I managed to say. Laura's gaze moved between the phone and me, searching for the right words, but they seemed to elude her. I could see her mentally retracing her steps, trying to find a plausible excuse, but the truth was too obvious to hide. She was doing something on my phone. She began hesitantly. "That guy was there, as were the girls we talked about. He came over to us, chatted a bit with us, and that's all." The more she spoke, the more her voice teetered on the brink of despair. Images of the past months flashed through my mind. Late nights at work, her coming home smelling of another man's cologne, the quiet phone calls she claimed were just from work. Every sign I had previously ignored was now glaringly obvious. "It's all a misunderstanding, dear," she sobbed. "I can explain everything. I don't know what you've got into your head, but I never cheated on you, and I would never dare to do so." I took a deep breath, trying to gather the shards of my composure. "Laura, I found the messages you deleted. There's no point in lying, and I also have a photo of you having sex at your work today." My words sounded like a verdict, shattering the last remnants of our shared world. She broke down, crying uncontrollably. The facade of innocence she had so painstakingly put on display crumbled before me, revealing the bitter truth of our reality. Her tears, though seemingly sincere, could not erase the betrayal that had deeply wounded my soul. "I never wanted this to happen," she whispered between sobs, deeply shaken by her own words. "It started as harmless flirting, and before I knew it, it was too late, and I didn't know what to do." Her confession cut through my heart, each word driving a sharp dagger of betrayal deeper. The life we had built together, our dreams, our future, seemed to slip right from under our feet. My thoughts returned to our wedding day, to the promises we made to each other, to the love we swore to never lose. How did we get here? I asked myself, looking down at Laura, realizing the full depth of pain we both felt. Yes, she made a terrible mistake, but the intensity of my anger was also tearing us apart. Taking a deep breath, I made the decision that seemed the only possible one at that moment. Let's talk in the morning, and for now, Let's try to get some sleep." My voice was calm, but the storm inside me was far from subsiding. That night, I completely exhausted all my strength, and I just wanted to fall asleep to forget everything that happened like a terrible dream. But unfortunately, morning came too quickly, and when I woke up, I was alone in the bedroom. I had no idea what I would say to Laura, but the first thing I wanted to do was apologize for the night, for how I had lost my temper. I hoped Laura would understand me and we could find a compromise. I didn't want to divorce her, at least not yet. So, I got out of bed and started looking for Laura around the house. My optimism was shattered the moment I heard the sound of a new message on my phone. The message was from Laura, and its words were cold, each sentence dripping with venom. "You think you're the victim here, but if you hadn't been so controlling and suffocating all these years, maybe I wouldn't have sought comfort elsewhere. This is all because of you." My heart sank. This wasn't the Laura I had fallen in love with. This was another side of her I had never seen before. Combative, spiteful, unrepentant. It was as if the events of the previous night flipped a switch inside her, resulting in an effect I hadn't anticipated. I thought Laura would show remorse, but it turned out to be the complete opposite. "I need you to leave. I won't come home until you do," she said sternly on the phone when I decided to call her. "I'm not going anywhere. We need to talk. And where are you, anyway?" I said firmly. She smirked. "You shouldn't care where I am and with whom. Just make sure the house is free by the evening, or else you'll confirm that you're indeed a weakling." "This is my house, and I can stay here as long as I want." "And seriously? A weakling? What kind of childish insult is that?" I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, though 100 ways to put her in her place were already running through my head. But her voice became more and more unpleasant and nasty, as if I was talking not to my wife, but to an enemy who was offended by the whole world. "We're married. This house is mine, and believe me, after our divorce, you won't have it, dear," she concluded. "What are you talking about? What divorce?" I asked. "The usual kind in case you decide to blackmail me again," she finished and hung up the phone. I couldn't understand why Laura had been so bold. I went into my phone's gallery and realized that all the photos with evidence were deleted, even from the recently deleted folder. I was in shock. I had given my phone to Laura yesterday and hadn't thought that she might delete all the evidence I could use against her. I quickly checked my email and saw that it was also clean. Not a single incoming or outgoing message to that girl existed. I was in trouble. I was left alone with my thoughts, and after a couple of hours, I texted her that I had left the house and she could return. Laura, as promised, came back home in the evening, apparently really thinking I was dumb enough to leave my own house. When she entered, she saw me at the doorstep and started to freak out. "What the hell are you doing here, you bastard? I hate you!" she screamed. And I let her scream for a few more seconds before I loudly and menacingly said, "Shut up," and she obediently listened. We went inside, and I told her that I wasn't going anywhere and that I wouldn't give her a divorce, that I wanted to live with her and that I loved her. It seemed like she understood and promised to end the affair with her lover right in front of me, directly calling him and saying it was over between them. I myself didn't understand what I wanted. I loved Laura and didn't want to divorce her. Laura and I started arguing every day, and it escalated to fights, with me being the one getting hit. I never raised my hand. I tried to return our relationship to its former state, but it was futile. Laura stopped any relations with guys because I simply wouldn't let her do so, and talks of divorce became more and more frequent, leading me to finally decide to sign the divorce papers, and we were given 90 days for reconciliation. But that was a mistake. Throughout this time, I had been working with a private detective, but because I was jealous of Laura and wanted to divorce her, I didn't let the detective work, and eventually I terminated his services. The stress from these endless conflicts started affecting my health. I could feel negative emotions taking over me. My blood pressure skyrocketed, and despair enveloped every moment of my life, making it burdensome and bleak. Talks of divorce turned into a nightmare with no awakening. Eventually, I realized it was sheer hell, and what we had before would never be again, so I started asking Laura for a fair and equitable division of property. However, Laura was unyielding, demanding more and more, until it felt like she wanted to strip me of everything I had ever owned. At one point, she even brought a man into our house, and while I was sitting in the living room, she was having sex with him in our bedroom, justifying it by saying, "We are getting divorced anyway." But the divorce process kept being delayed, again by Laura. At some point, I grew tired of fighting with her. I realized that if I had filed for divorce right away, I wouldn't be in this situation now. One evening, over beers with an old friend, I opened up, sharing my troubles. He listened attentively, nodding thoughtfully. "If you really want her to leave," he began, "you need to start dating. Show her that you can be happy without her." At first, his advice seemed absurd, but upon further reflection, I realized there was wisdom in his words. So, I got in touch with an old classmate, Rachel, who had always been kind to me. To my surprise, she agreed to play the role of my girlfriend. Our date in front of Laura became a catalyst for unexpected changes. Seeing us together with Rachel, laughing and holding hands, seemed to throw Laura's already fragile state into chaos. Her reaction to our interaction, our meetings, and especially the nights spent together, resembled that of someone who had lost control of the situation. This turn of events brought new aspects of our breakup to the surface. Laura, who seemed unshakable in her demands and accusations, suddenly found herself in a position where her usual methods of manipulation and pressure no longer worked. For the first time in a long time, I felt that I had taken the initiative into my own hands, deciding not to be a victim of circumstances. Laura's resolve weakened after a few weeks. She came to me with a new proposal, which was a ray of light in the dark corridor of our separation. She would take 20% of our assets and leave, terms significantly softer than her initial demands. Although the number still seemed high, I agreed without hesitation, eager to end our draining coexistence. When Laura packed her things and left, the house was filled with a daunting silence. The chaos that had previously dominated our space subsided, leaving behind a consuming sense of relief. To my surprise, the divorce process went quickly, and within 2 months the final papers were signed. Experiencing betrayal was heart-wrenching and left a terrible pain in my soul, a kind I had never felt before. But the following 6 months turned into absolute hell, surpassing even my darkest imaginings of suffering. I came to the conclusion that there's nothing worse than dealing with an unreasonable person who not only possesses information against you, but also doesn't hesitate to use it for their purposes. The worst part of this whole situation was the realization that I might have never truly known the real Laura. Was she always this cruel, and I simply failed to notice these traits in her character before? Where was my mind all these years? I felt as if I was suffering from amnesia. Every memory of our life together was foggy and distant. All our bright moments, once recorded in my memory in high resolution, now seemed blurred and distant, like old frames on VHS tapes played through a broken VCR. This strange sensation might have been just a symptom of a broken heart and psychological trauma left after our breakup. Who knows, maybe it was simply the result of profound emotional shock. Rachel and I, during our time together, really forged a bond akin to that which develops between agents deep undercover. Our shared secret, the time spent together, playing a couple, all this bred an unexpected closeness between us. But when the dust settled after my breakup with Laura and Rachel took a step back, we both felt the need to give each other space. There was potential for something genuine and real between us, but we both rushed, feeling that everything happened too quickly, prematurely. We agreed to stay in touch, giving life a chance to show us where we could end up a few months after this slowdown. With Laura's departure and Rachel's temporary retreat, I found solace in solitude. The weight that had long pressed on my shoulders seemed to evaporate, leaving behind a sense of liberation. I began to rediscover lost hobbies that I had neglected, consumed by the storm in my personal life. My passion for the piano, which I had abandoned, and my love for Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which I had overlooked, all became part of my life again. Days were filled with new light, and nights became calmer and quieter. In these moments of silence, I realized that I was on the path to healing. The potential for new relationships with Rachel seemed enticing, but I knew I needed time alone, time for personal recovery and reflection. I needed to rediscover the person I was before all these twists and turns, to find joy in the little things and satisfaction in personal achievements again. One evening, playing a soft melody on the piano, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future, a feeling that life is still full of possibilities and that after the storm, there always comes a rainbow. Perhaps in entering into marriage, many of us do not fully understand what we are getting into. There are so many unknowns, so many variables that can either strengthen the union or lead to its downfall. Maybe it's time to rethink our expectations of marriage, understanding that it's not just a celebration of love, but also continuous work on the relationship, requiring patience, understanding, and a willingness to compromise. My experiences have shown me that life is a journey full of lessons, and that every experience, whether joyful or painful, brings a valuable lesson and makes us wiser.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!